Welcome back to the Everything Property Podcast. Now, if you've been following along the last few weeks, we've went down from our property search from a macro down to the micro. We're now at the suburb level and we can start getting into the good stuff, the negotiations and dealing with real estate agents. Here to help us out with this is a guest who you could say has been in real estate since the early 90s. He's transacted over 3,500 property deals. He's launched real estate franchises and worked as an agent, and now he's helping negotiate and buy properties for investors and home buyers. He's a tragic Arsenal fan like me, and he's got the grey hairs to prove it. He's flown in from the Gold Coast to be here, but don't hold that against him. Scott Aggett, welcome to the Everything Property Podcast.
Thanks, mate. You got the grey hair right. You got the tragic Arsenal right. It's good timing as well to talk about Arsenal after we just lost the league. But mate, don't ditch the Gold Coast. I'm a Sydney boy. I'm a born and bred Sydney boy.
Then why are you up there? Tell me.
Sunshine and good times.
Okay. Just quickly before we dive in, though, Arsenal season, what are your thoughts, feelings and emotions on that one?
Oh, it's a roller coaster as it is every year. I'm incredibly proud of their effort and was stoked to watch them go that close, but obviously gutted they didn't get the chocolates.
Yeah, look, any other season without Man City, it's like we'd win that hands down, but look, they're on a bit of a run, so we will reminisce on the early 2000s, my friend, about our success, and we'll move on back to the property
Indeed.
chat. But look, I want to sort of bring everyone up to speed in regards to who you are and your efforts as a real estate agent in Sydney, opening franchises and moving up to the Gold Coast, and then Hello House, the company that you launched, and what you're sort of working in now. So tell us a little bit about your agent days, Bell Property, Eastern Suburbs.
Yeah, well, I actually started before that in Ray White. So I was at Ray White for about 3 years before I went over to London. Did 5 years working in property in London. Came back at about 24, 25, and then started with Bell when they were just a tiny little brand of 3 offices. Took the first franchise in Potts Point, and then over 12, 15 years ended up doing Walsh Bay with another mate that I used to work with that came down and did that one on the waterfront. He's doing really well with McGrath now, Richard Chalhoub. Yep. And Surrey Hills. So we did the third office as well, and ended up selling out of that in about, I think, the end of 2016. Got out of it. So all in all, I did about 23 years as an agent. What
made you get out?
Hated it.
Really?
Yeah, I hated it for a long time.
Why'd you do it for... Okay, so you hated it for a long time.
I hated it for a long time. The money was good. I thought I was reasonably good at it. And I just didn't know what else I could sort of reskill and do. I had this idea that I wanted to negotiate only. I loved the negotiation part of it, and I thought for about 10 years before I left, what if I could just negotiate all day? That'd be my dream. I don't have to deal with all these people that are aspirational tire kickers, all these vendors that are not realistic, all these people lying to you and lying back to them. And I thought there's just got to be a better way. So it was kind of, that seed was planted a long way before that, but I just stuck at it because I thought this is my ticket to build wealth. It's what I'm good at, and I'll just keep chugging away. But yeah, I was pretty unhappy, I think, for quite a long time doing it.
Okay, well, good on you for getting out and starting your own business, and lucky that we have you on. So we're talking about, we've the last couple of weeks, anyone that's been listening, we're talking about, we went macro, we went how to sort of locate suburbs at different prices and how to sort of narrow down to suburbs and stuff like that. We get on to this level now. So if anyone's listening to this and they've done their property research and they've been listening to the last couple of podcasts, what they're going to have now is they're going to have a suburb or they're going to have an area. And they're going to need to start talking with agents, negotiating, putting in offers, all that kind of stuff. That's where we get down to the fun part. I know a lot of people sort of skip all the research and want to get to that straight away, but I must caution that with needing to do that macro level research down to the micro first. But talk to me a little bit about like setting up and at that suburb level, where and how do we start?
Well, I think the key thing for me when we're coaching anyone to be a professional buyer is to be really honest about what your North Star is. So what are the locations that you're aiming at that actually fit your parameters in terms of budget and what you're looking to spend? So we would want to get into the weeds to understand what your 5 non-negotiables are that are going to really light you up, that are your absolute, not giveaway. You're not going to bend on that whatsoever. So we're looking for a simple list that we can communicate really clearly with selling agents in that defined location to help create more opportunity. We want to get access to more properties at an earlier stage. So whether that's pre and off market, We want to reduce our buyer competition by doing that, and that gives us the ability, hopefully, to get one-on-one with motivated sellers, and there's the ability to turn the screw and save money. So we buy better by getting laser focused down to 1 to 2 core suburbs, getting really specific around what the buyer brief is. And mine, for example, right now as a guide for people that are listening, might be Mermaid Beach, $2.5 million, knockdown house, north to rear garden, east of the easement. Now, any agent worth their salt in Mermaid Beach knows exactly what that asset type is. Yep, there's no confusion. It's a knockdown house with a north to rear garden, and they're all crystal clear on where that location is. So not only have I narrowed that down to Mermaid Beach, one suburb, I've now said between the council easement line and the sand, which is a row of grid streets. Yep. So very specific. So now I don't have to wade through all of the properties that don't fit my criteria. I don't have to run the risk of making poor value judgments on properties that are outside of my core focus. Yep. And I just get really laser and focused and honed in on those properties that suit.
Okay, so we'll use Mermaid Beach as a working example. How are you delivering that brief to the agents? Are you messaging it? Are you calling every single agent in Mermaid Beach? Are you identifying the agents that are selling off market or on market auction campaigns? How are you sort of selecting agents, or are you going out to all of them? And then how are you delivering that?
I think the biggest mistake that buyers are going to make at this point is that they will choose the top agents that they deal with on a daily basis or a weekly basis that have got the largest profile, and continue to build rapport on the proviso they think that's going to drive good outcomes or quality outcomes on that search. If I had to ask you, and you might not know Mermaid Beach, how many agents have individually sold a property in the last 12 months in Mermaid Beach? And I'm talking about Jane, Peter and Paul, not McGrath or Bell Property. How many agents would you guess as a stab in the dark?
Look, I don't know Mermaid Beach from a grain of salt, but let's say 12.
Yeah, I was going to say there's no wrong answer unless you're wrong.
All right, I'll just say there's 12.
Yeah, there's 12. And that's a good guess. So I ask that question 8 times a day to 8 new buyers, and they say between 10 and 30. So you're smack in the middle of that average.
Yeah.
But if you type in rate my agent and you type in Mermaid Beach, it's likely, and I'm just guessing off the top of my head, but it's likely there's over 100 agents that have sold there. Why that's important is because the reason I just said to you, you're going to aim at the top 12 agents that have got the most profile, the signboards up, the flyers in the letterboxes. You're going to see them at their open for inspections, and you're going to see them on realestate.com dominating that space. But in a modern real estate office, any agent has got access to a shared database. So everyone knows where those sellers are. So if you can get clearly defined, and then you can speak to more people than everybody else, and you can be consistent with that strategy, you'll have better fortune. So that's the simplest way of breaking it down to that we do for all of our customers.
So you're saying you're going to every agent then?
Yep.
Delivering that brief?
Yep.
Is that phone call? Is that text? Is that email? Because I do that with a few areas that I'm looking at the moment, and I feel like sometimes you get put on to that the emailing list, the pre-market list, that you sort of get everything. Even if you deliver the brief, you just get put on that emailing list, and you get sent villas, you get sent, all that type of stuff. How do you make sure that it's actually captured and it's on their end, it's registered and it's facing their all the agents of that office have all that data that you've delivered?
Sure. Well, I think the first thing to be honest about is they can't help but spam you. So you're going to get on their just sold list, just listed list of properties that don't resonate with what you're looking for. They'll just completely ignore it. So that's just part of the game. And I will preface this whole thing by saying another key point that I talk to all of our customers with is that property is not an exact science, and there's no silver bullet with any strategy. There's no guarantee that you can buy off market or pre-market. The only way you can do that is guarantee to overpay, and no one wants to do that. That's counterproductive to everything that I do in terms of being a negotiation expert. So what this is doing is giving you the greatest chance of talking to the most people in the marketplace with a really clearly defined brief that you know exists before you start. And if you do that, you're leaving no stone unturned, and you can't really be doing any more. So to answer your question, we define that down to 5 ironclad bullet points. We send that on email every single Tuesday without fail. We do it on email, and we do it on Tuesday for a specific reason. Tuesday's got the best opening rate from 6.5 years of testing it.
There you go. That's a good little insight for the podcast.
And I've surveyed agents and asked them how they want to receive it, and they want to receive it on email. And the reason they want to receive it on email, and the reason why I do 5 bullet points and not 8 or just a general email with a long list of what we're looking for, is because on average, agents in Australia meet 200 new buyers a week. So no disrespect to you or me or anyone else, but you're not special. There's no way to cut through that unless you've got a really clearly defined brief. They're too busy. They want to see something they can open up on the run and say, yes, that exists, I'll go action that. Or no, it exists, it doesn't exist, and I'm going to throw that in the toilet. So that's the best shot you can. We've trialled this at 8, we've trialled this at 10 points. When you start to get very specific, it gets harder and harder. So when people say to me, but I want a blue kitchen and a pink door, that's when I say to them, okay, well, the agent's going to throw that straight in the toilet because they can't be bothered trying to find that. So as an agent, when you've got this many people in front of you, a good agent can only carry, say, 4 to 6 quality sales campaigns at once. It's too busy driving around Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, or anywhere else to get to these open for inspections. It's too busy servicing those 200 new buyers a week. It's too busy managing the expectations of your sellers and prospecting for new business. So they're going to play the cherry picking game. They're going to pick out the best buyers that are their underbidders from their auctions, their underbidders from their negotiations, and their live buyers that are on those sales campaigns now, and they're going to sell hard to those people. So they've got the best chance of getting pre and off market listings. So the only way to keep getting those opportunities is to keep missing out effectively. And unfortunately, that's one of the key stats in the industry. The average Australian buyer takes 7 months to buy, and they make 5 offers that they miss out before they settle on property number 6.
7 months to buy.
Yep. So they're the average stats. So this idea for us is to jump that queue of having to miss out 5 times and to make sure you're really honest with yourself about what you're looking for and that it exists before you start.
So good. Set up the brief, 5 to 8 key points.
5.
5 only.
5.
5 key points.
Yep.
Emailing that every Tuesday to every single agent in the area that transacts. Is that just you're getting that list from Rate My Agent or
No.
realestate.com?
No, we built a digital tool called House Finder, and we can extract all that information in seconds.
Okay.
Yep.
Interesting.
But you can do it manually, and for 6 years or 5.5 years, we sat there and did it manually. Yep. So we would go through realestate.com, Rate My Agent, and different other platforms to pull all those agents and build that database. You can actually go and buy databases of agents' information to get those contact lists if you want to do that as well.
Yep.
But for your average buyer, they should only be focused on 1 to 2 core suburbs, as we just said. So this is a job that you do once. It might take 2 hours to do it. You've got that list for life. Maybe you need to add a couple of people in every time you're buying, but otherwise it's a pretty consistent list.
Perfect. And you're not calling them. It's just an email every week.
Well, for our clients, we do that as a starting point every single week. We then manually call over the top of that. Yep. Okay. But you'll find when you start calling and texting, and we've done all this research and done this before, that you'll find that the text messages annoy the agents. They know that they've already received the email. If they don't have something, they don't have something. So the more you annoy them, the worse that process is. We've found that the email has got the best cut through and the best results. When we need to, we'll do a manual call session over the top of that as well.
I like that. Talk to me a little bit about pre-market, off-market. What are your thoughts? Is that in terms of pricing, say people say you only need to acquire or you should only be acquiring off-market. Other people say that people that are selling off-market often want ridiculous prices. That's why it's off-market, and the difference between sort of pre and off-market.
There's big differences. I think to address the pre and off market thing, I think it's the biggest furphy in Australian real estate. It's just been built up by buyers agents saying that this is the holy grail of buying property. If you can buy pre and off market, and if you do it smartly and you know exactly what you're looking for and you understand value, yes, there's great value in not having competition and finding motivated sellers. But I'd say the vast majority of the off-market in inverted commas is done by buyers agents trying to buy their way into an opportunity or buy someone out of a property. And I think when you do that, you typically just overpay for that luxury. So I say to our clients, that's great that you want pre and off-market listings, and so does everybody, and that's good, and we definitely need to build a strategy for that. But statistically, it's around 20% of properties in Australia sell that way. Why do they sell that way? Let's unpack that.
Yep.
And let's also talk about the elephant in the room, which is on realestate.com or Domain, 60 to 80% of properties are going to sell that way. So what's your strategy to find the way to control the negotiation and see these properties at an earlier stage and have the same success rate as if you were going it alone buying it pre or off market?
Yep.
Because I'd argue that you want the outcome. It doesn't matter how it comes. You want the result.
Agreed. Yep.
So then we really get into the weeds around, why agents do that. We just addressed that just before. They're going to take those cherry-picked buyers. The reason they do that is because the only way to drive more revenue to your bottom line as an agent, you can only control X amount of listings at any given time, is to do these deals behind the scenes, right? That makes you earn more money and you can do more deals and get traction in the marketplace and build market share. why the sellers, the next question for everyone that I say that to is, yeah, but in my market in Perth or in my market in Brisbane or my market in Whoop Whoop, why would anyone in their, right mind sell a property off market when as soon as they put it on the market, there's 100 people through the open for inspection and it sells for 10% more than what it's worth? Yep. And I think there's two parts of that. Understanding what it's worth. People's perception is, it's sold for so much more than what it's worth. I'm like, well, that is what it's worth. That's market value.
What people are prepared
what
to pay.
people are prepared to pay.
Yep.
So you got to reset your mind in terms of what things are actually worth. Now, if you're talking about why sellers will put their hands up to sell a property, there's a host of different reasons. As an agent, when I would go to you and David and say, okay, great, I've got a buyer for you. Would you consider selling? Now, the reasons why you're going to say yes is because you've bought something already and you need to sell. So there's a big portion of people that are under some sort of time pressure like that and want to act. If they've got a buyer there, they'll trade. Yep. Then there's property management. 4% of every property management rent roll turns over nationally every year. So there's a host of landlords, I should say, that are potential vendors but can't sell because they've got a residential tenancy agreement where they're trying to sell to owner-occupier end users, or they've got a messy tenant. So if someone comes along with the right buyer that will take that situation on, they'll sell and they'll likely sell for less than what it's worth because it saves them a vacancy period for marketing, it saves them styling, it saves them marketing costs, and it saves them the time delay in doing that. So that's a big part of it. The other reasons why we had a lot of inexperienced, nervous sellers, older people don't like open for inspections and agents dealing with it, people that are sick, people that are traveling overseas or for a job or for family emergencies. There's a lot of reasons why these things happen. So you've got to have a strategy of how do you ascertain those opportunities.
Okay, so let's run through it. Let's say that I've picked Mermaid Waters. I've got my list out.
Mate, you changed suburbs already. We were Mermaid Beach.
Mermaid Waters. Okay, I'm not. Look, Queensland, Gold Coast, not my. It's not my thing. We're Sydney. I'm a Sydney boy through and through. So, okay, Mermaid Waters, Mermaid Beach. Let's just say we've went out to all the agents. Now, agent calls us with something off market or pre-market. How then are we approaching that? That's almost the start of the negotiation in my eyes. Is they come in and they go, "Hey Scott, I've got something that ticks all your box. My vendor has an expectation. Let's just say, I don't know. Let's just say $1 million is my vendor's expectation." How do we then dive into, am I getting back to him straight away? Do I need time to think about it? Counter offer? Where does that sort of start to go?
I think the line that I live or die by is speed is paramount to buying success. Everything is done with speed. And speed doesn't mean rushing. Speed for me is navigating your way through the buying process really quickly to negate the external pressures of buyer competition. Yeah, and also giving a vendor a chance to even think about what potentially has just happened in terms of you just fleeced them by 50 grand or 20 grand or whatever it might be if you get it right in the negotiation. So speed's paramount to success. So anything that you get, whether it's an on-market or an off-market opportunity, you would want to knock the door down to get in there as quickly as possible. And then, as you said rightly, the negotiation starts from the first conversation. So it's how you set that meeting up. And the dialogue that you use that dictates what happens next. And that what happens next might be today's Thursday, it might be the next conversation you have on Monday with them about the deal, or tomorrow afternoon or whatever. There's variations in terms of how long that process may play out. But I'm one for planting a seed and watching it grow in negotiation. Like I want to anchor back to a conversation that was really clear on what my motivation was for buying, what the time pressure I had for buying, and I'll use that anchor point throughout a negotiation to get what I want as best I can. And again, there's no perfect outcome in real estate. I say this really confidently as if this is my way or the highway and it works every time. It doesn't work every time. Anyone that's honest with themselves understands that as a negotiator, when you do this, there's patterns that emerge. You know what your highest percentage chance is of a certain play working or not. But sometimes even that high percentage play doesn't work. So then you need to have other tools in your arsenal to be able to draw upon and say, okay, great, A closed, B opens. What do I do next? Okay. When A closes, I go to B, and this is my B strategy.
So let's dive into maybe a possible, do you have a possible sort of response or some dialogue around that first conversation? Because if, let's just say you've been looking for that property for 6 months or 7 months, as you said, if I've been looking for 7 months, I'll get, a lot of people get really excited. It's popped up, it's pre-market or off-market.
I can see the red dot on your mind as a real estate agent in the old days. Exactly. There you are. There he is. He's been around for 7 months. Welcome back, buddy.
That's what people don't understand. They go to the agent. Oh, I've been looking for 7 months. I'm really excited. Yeah, it ticks all the boxes. Yeah. And they've just laid out all their cards. So what's a way that I can set it up that I'm interested, but it's not something I've been looking for the last 6 months, and I'm really desperate to buy this property?
Oh, I love you. You're my favourite buyer.
How do I set this up,
Well, let's flip it. Let's flip it to what I think, to put this into context and to give you a bit of role play in this situation, because I think this is the type of role play that you won't hear much, in the industry or any podcast that is powerful for a buyer to go and use themselves tomorrow in this negotiation. So let's start from the start. You've seen that property. It's a Tuesday. You ring up the agent and you say, I've just seen 12 Smith Street come online.
So off market.
Oh, it's off market?
Agent sent it to you and said, Scott, this ticks all your boxes. It's off market.
Yep.
Let me know if you're interested.
Yeah. Well, I would still try and use the same leverage point as I would have used in that example. So what I'd want to know is ask a set of key questions to understand the seller's motivation, because one of the problems with buying off market is it's often with a client that is not particularly motivated to go anytime soon unless they're paid an absolute premium. So I'd want to establish whether you're chasing a dead end before you start or, you've got a seller that really is ready to meet the market and trade. So there's a whole heap of different questions. So in that situation, I would want to know from the agent, okay, great. What's the seller's circumstances? What's the timeline for them to transact? Is there any other buyers that have seen this property? Is there any other offers that you've rejected or the highest offer you've rejected? What buys it? There's a key question that I always ask and then just shut up. What buys it? Oh, they're thinking around that kind of 950 a mil. Okay, great. Well, this is where I introduce straight away the anchor point. So I've asked what buys it. They give me a bullshit answer. Then I start to go to, okay, great. Well, the reason I'm so direct with this is because I'm a long way down the line with another property through another agent. I've seen that property last week. We're just doing a building and pest on it at the moment. That agent's telling us, today's Tuesday, that agent's telling us if we don't exchange on that unconditionally by Thursday afternoon, close of business, they're going to actively put that on the market. Obviously, we've been looking for 7 months. We don't want that to happen. We're ready to buy that property. This one's just come up with you, which is fantastic. This is in our preferred location. Preferred is a key word here in my negotiations, because as soon as an agent realises that you're just playing them off against another property, they lose interest. If you make it clear that this is the option you want, that's a powerful word in negotiation. So this is my preferred option if I can buy it at what I perceive as the right price. Yep. Okay. And then I'll go into the time pressure of that. So I've got to act by this time. So therefore, when can you get me in? Okay. And I go down that path of pushing them again on price. So because I need to know and do this quickly, what exactly is going to buy this property? Because I'll tell you straight away, I'm in or out. And that kind of puts the pressure back on the agent to give you a number. And they might say, well, look, we've knocked back 980 already from another buyer off our database. They counted at $1,020,000. Great. Okay, well, you were telling me 950 to $1 million. The number's really $1,020,000. So I'm trying to gather as much data as I can. But what I've just done to you as the agent is anchor to another property that once I've seen this property really quickly, because I've given you time pressure to act, I'm trying to reverse the fear of loss on the seller once I show an interest in the property, and I'll come back and I'll anchor to that property that I've got, in inverted commas, under offer already. So it starts, that's why I said I plant that seed and watch that grow. I ask the questions that I want to know about, the motivation of the seller, the timing of that sale, the highest offer they've rejected, what buys it now. But then I've just put that little seed there on the side, and then I'll go through it. I'll see that property, and then I'll turn around to them and say, yep, great, really interested in that property. Obviously, I've got time pressure with this other one that I mentioned to you yesterday on the call. And because you've already raised that 24 hours earlier or at a previous time, the agent's much more likely to believe that there's a property there that you're actually seriously considering. What happens with most inexperienced negotiators or buyers is that they'll go through the whole process, they'll fall in love with the property as you've set up front, and then when they get to negotiation point, they'll say, oh, and there's another property I'm seeing on Saturday. I'm like, all right, everyone says that to me. It's the same. I'll just call you bluff on that, because every inexperienced buyer says the same thing because they think that's their leverage point. It's doing that earlier. And again, this isn't the same strategy I use on every property, but this is something that you could use that's a high percentage play like that. So anchor back to that other property. The following day on the Wednesday, I can call back and say, yep, great, David, love that property. Really interested in that property. It would be our preference if we can buy it at the right level. With your permission, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make one offer I'm just going to make our best and final offer because obviously I don't have much time. I'm going to go buy that other property if it doesn't work at this level. So with your permission, I'm just going to make one offer. Now, the reason why that's important is because you're saying to the agent, this isn't a game of unders and overs.
Yep.
I'm going to make you an offer and you don't have the right to come back to me and expect me to pay another 20, 30, 50 grand. It's not going to happen. And you know, and you can openly tell your vendor that if they don't accept this offer, I'll be gone. So if they perceive that to be close to what they want and this to be a good option for them to sell quietly off market without the marketing costs, then this is your opportunity to do it.
Are you saying that to the agent?
No, but that's what you're alluding to, and every agent knows that. And what you realize is if you use the right dialogue, and I love doing this on email as well with agents, I know the agents are going to forward that email to the client. So I'll word the email and I'll just load it up exactly how I want them to sell it. And they lap it up, the agents, because they don't need to have that conversation with their seller. So they can turn around and say, it's not me, it's the market. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm doing the same thing. I'm empowering the agent in that situation, you, David, to go back to your client and say, look, I know you want $1,020,000. These guys have come in at $990. They're not going to spend $1 more on it. I told you it was worth around $1 million. It looks like if you want to sell off market without any marketing costs, this is it. This is your chance. It's $990. What do you want to do?
Okay.
Yep.
What about if the owner has expectations that are a little bit too high, or perhaps they have it for $1 million and we can maybe get a deal done? What if the agent's just trying to? Is the agent ever feeding you back and saying, "Oh, look, we had $1,050,000. We rejected $1,050,000."
Yep.
Are you taking that into consideration and trying to peg close to that, or you just what it's worth, what you think it's worth, and you're $980? You know, how much truth is it to the agent to come back to you and go, "Oh, we've rejected." You know, I've shown it to one other guy too.
Sure.
He's put in $1,050,000.
Yep. So that's called price positioning.
Yep.
And we do that all the time as real estate agents, and we'll position it high, low, or on the money, depending on how we want to negotiate that outcome and where the vendor's expectations are and what the timing is and the selling, method of sale. So there's a whole different heap of, tricks that go on behind the scenes in regards to price positioning. I asked the question because I want the data points. So I want to know that if there's another offer that's been rejected, but then you need to understand whether they're bluffing or not bluffing. And then the reason that the way that you do that is to fall back on your deep analysis and understanding of what market value is. So you can't be bluffed if you really understand the numbers. So if the comparable sales are between $975 and $1 million, for example, in that instance, and they tell you they've got someone at $1,050,000 that they've rejected, well, then my answer to that would be, well, it's a waste of time me going to see it because I don't see value at that level.
Okay.
Yep. So, and you have to be honest with yourself. Like, if you can't find the reasons why it's not worth beyond, $1 million in that instance, why would you waste your time chasing a dead end? Well, so that flushes the agent out, and they'll either say, "Oh, well, that was what agents often will say is exactly what you said." They'll position it at a high number to try to give you confidence to act at a particular point.
Bring you up. Yep.
Yep. And then when I poo-poo it and say, "Well, that's great, but the comparable evidence doesn't stack that up, so I'm going to walk away from it." Often, what I hear from agents is, "Oh, well, that was like 6 months ago, and it was, a different market, and I think that guy was probably overpaying, and he's not." So what you're saying to me is he's not there today, basically. It was horseshit the whole time.
It was a historic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that happens all the time to us, that they'll price position it high to give you confidence to act at a certain level. But if you punch a hole through that and then threaten to effectively walk away, then you'll see what the response is, and in that response is where you can work out the BS meter, and that's where you call the bluff. So it's just understanding and having the confidence, but that confidence comes from understanding market value. You've got to be really good with your numbers, and that's why getting laser focused down to 1 to 2 core suburbs is so important, because if you're watching a market, and I think you only need to watch a market for 4 to 8 weeks to be an expert in it.
Okay, interesting, because I hear a lot of people say you need 3 months, 6 months, 4 to 8 weeks. Why is that?
It depends where you are in terms of what the turnover rate is. But if you're looking in somewhere like Surrey Hills, where I was active as an agent here myself, there's so much volume in terms of turnover of property that you get a really good grasp on the market and what it's doing within a 4 to 8 week period if you're active. But the key is being active. You've got to get out and do the hard work. There's no magic wand where you can say, yep, great, I can look at realestate.com and work out what market value is. Agents are going to present property in their best possible light. Everybody knows that. So when you see a property that's sold for $1 million on the weekend, you can't tell if it was overlooked. You can't tell if it had road noise. There's things that you physically need to go through and inspect for yourself to get an understanding of where these value pockets are, where these properties were undersold, or where someone got carried away and paid a premium for it. Why did they get carried away and pay a premium? Why was there 2 or 3 people that pushed it to 1.1 when you thought it was worth $1 million when you looked at it online? It's because it's in a particular school zone, in a beautiful tree-lined street with a north-facing garden with rear lane parking. Like, it had all the ingredients for it to go gangbusters, because those properties, if you watch the market intently, don't turn over. The rate of turnover is slow. So it's difficult to replicate that asset. So therefore those properties sell for a premium. They're in high demand. So 4 to 8 weeks, whether it's 3 months or 6 months, but I think 4 to 8 weeks is enough. But the key is I aim to see 50 properties if I'm buying in a marketplace.
Yep.
So I want to physically inspect that many homes. Right? If you're doing that, and if you're attending live auctions, you can understand market depth at any given time. You can see where the bidding stops. You can see how many people are registered. You can see how many people didn't sell and what their expectations were in terms of where the property was caught on the market with reserve. There's a whole heap of data that you learn if you're actively watching what's happening around you. If you see where the buyers are at open for inspections, why is there 30 people at that house and 3 people at this house? Yep. And you can determine where is the pockets within those locations that outperform others. So when I'm doing that, then I get some really good value points. I track what agents are quoting versus what it eventually sells for. That gives me a gauge really quickly of who's underquoting. I can look at it and go, well, David, add 20% basically to whatever David tells you. And you can't use that as your rule of thumb, but it's just another data point for me. It's like, okay, well, most likely David's listings, if it's on the open market, are plus 20%. Most likely Sally's are plus 12% or whatever it might be. And it just gives you a bit more insight about where these things are going to be pitched when it comes down to negotiation time.
Okay, and talk to me about, just quickly on that note of attending 50 plus open houses, are you doing anything in particular to stand out or be memorable, or to talk with the agent? Are you not talking to him? Are you asking him any particular questions through those open homes?
Always be polite. I'm always polite, happy, have a joke with them, whatever. I'm trying to build rapport with people. I'm trying to be a person that they want to go out of their way to help, and someone that they perceive is in a position to buy a property. So I always give them the honest truth of where I'm at. So I'll go through properties and I'll say to them, I'll give you all the feedback in real time. Like, I'll tell you exactly what I think it's worth based on other properties that I've seen, and I'll tell you exactly where I'm at in my timeline. Because otherwise they ring you and they don't perceive you to be a real buyer. So if they ring me and I'm week 1 of that 8-week process, for example, and I give them the runaround and I don't give them the information I need and pretend I'm a buyer and I'm not a buyer, they're unlikely 6 or 8 weeks later to be feeding you pre and off market listings. So I'll say to them in that instance, hey, I've just started my search. I probably need 4 to 8 weeks before I'm in the market. I'm just fine tuning where the sweet spot is and exactly what type of property I want to buy. I'm not a buyer for you today, but I'll give you as much feedback as I need so you can help. That'll help you do your job with your seller and get that property sold. And I hope you get a great result. Like, good luck with the sale, and ring me anytime. And when I'm ready and I'm closer to that fire point, well, then I'll let you know. I'll reach out and let you know and say good day. And that for me has just served me really well. People are just like, oh, yeah, great. Okay, good. Quality feedback, good communicator, nice person. Whereas when I was an agent, all I deal with is people coming through. I'd have 25 people come through and open for inspection, and every one of you are open for inspection. I'm just being hypothetical here with the numbers. All day on Monday and all day on Tuesday, I'd ring all those 25 people over and over again, and no one would call me back. And you're like, okay, well, none of you can help yourself. You know what I mean? Like, if anyone could actually go out of their way to help themselves, so they always turn around and say, well, agents are pricks. I don't want to deal with agents. Agents are liars. And like, agents are actively trying to help you as well do their do their job. And I get it. I get it, all the issues with an agent having been one. I'm not here defending agents, but your buyers have got to help themselves as well. And there's a smarter way of doing things. It's just, you just need to go out of your way and be a nice person. And this, unfortunately, when you deal with the public, you realize how many sour-faced people there are and how many people that are just really negative and don't believe that they should give you any information because it's their private business. It's like, well, it's your private business, but it's going to remain your private business because I'm never going to help you. Yeah, you're never going to get the assistance
or anything like that. True, very valid points. Okay, so talk to me a little bit about, potentially we've sort of covered the off-market area and what happens if the agent's setting it. What about pre-market?
I think they're pretty similar, really. I mean, pre-market, you're going to be competing against other people off their database. So it changes from potentially a one-on-one situation with a negotiation with a seller to then a multi-offer deal potentially off the database. those best buyers that are going to go through those properties are people that are typically the underbidders that have missed out previously. So you can expect some fierce competition at that early stage.
Yep.
I think probably the biggest downfall for inexperienced buyers in that position is they get a pre-market opportunity and they perceive themselves to be in a special position where they can take a bit of time because it's not on the market. But the reality is the agents just brought forward probably the 5 best buyers they're going to have out of the next 4 weeks of showing 100 people through the door, and just pitched you against them on day 1 or day 0. Yep. And the likelihood of that selling or a strong offer coming out of that is really high. So at that point, you need to be really on your guard about understanding the fundamentals of market value and be in a position to have the confidence to act with speed. Yeah, and we'll keep talking about that. Speed is just everywhere through the process. Speed is paramount.
What about how long is that pre-market opportunity, that pre-market window, right? So I assume pre-market is they've got it probably all ready to go, market launch, maybe a week before it hits market. They'll be like, I'll dabble a little bit of breadcrumbs in the water to see with these guys who have been in touch or that I know from other properties.
Yep.
Do you have a week to move? Do you have 2 weeks? Do you have a day? What's that sort of pre-market window to get a really good solid offer and give yourself the best opportunity of buying that before it hits realestatedomain.com?
Yeah, if you talk about the agents' CRM systems, like their software that they use, typically the pre-market stuff sits between 1 and 7 days. So you might get 7 days before it's openly on the market. You might get less than 24 hours. It might be we're uploading it this afternoon and there's an opportunity for you to come through from my database this morning and have a shot at it. So it varies greatly. There's no rule of thumb where I can say to you wholeheartedly, you've got 2 days or you've got 3 days. And it doesn't matter anyway, because whether you had 7 days or 1, if it's the right property, you should have bought it within the first 2 hours. Yeah, or it doesn't make any difference how long you've got. If it's the right fit, you've been looking and you know it's the solution to the problem that you're hunting for, and you understand the numbers, well, then you should be striking no matter what.
Okay, so
you don't have time to sleep on these things in a busy market.
Are you calling that agent straight away when you get that email? Like, what's the?
Yep.
It's straight away. It's call. This is something that we're interested in.
Yeah. I jokingly say to my clients, but it's not a joke. I want you to ring me between leaving the front door and getting to the car.
You say that to your clients?
Yep.
Why?
Because if you've seen it and you've liked it,
I
I want to know about it.
Property.
Yeah.
Okay,
I want to know about it before you even reach the car to leave. Yeah, that fast. And I'm kind of joking, but I'm not joking, because what happens is you go and get in your car, David, and you go to drive away, and one of the other buyers that was there sticks around and goes, this is what used to happen to me as an agent all the time. They stick around, they sniff around.
I've done that one.
Yep, exactly. And they go, great, okay, well, where do we need to position ourselves to buy this one? Oh, great, okay, cool. What buy is it today? Great, well, as you know, we've been looking for months, so let's just do a deal here. Bring your vendor. Yep. So that you're not even getting that chance. By the time you're driving off in the car to go home and have a sleep on it and have a cup of tea and a scone, someone else has already bought it. So you just can't sleep on these things. And it's not always that rush. Like, people will look at it and go, that's BS. Like, I sat on a deal for a week and then the agent was chasing me. There's, again, property's not an exact science. It doesn't always play out that way. But when you see these patterns emerge over doing this for 3 decades, what emerges is you need to act real quick in a busy market. Otherwise, you're going to be left with,
But act real quick, but also controlling that dialogue and asking the right questions, right? Not coming in too keen, too hot.
Yep, asking the key questions is really important, and being a really good listener. So a lot of people will ask the questions, will ask some questions and just talk straight over the top of the agent, or not really understand the nuances of what they're saying.
Oh.
Yeah.
You got 2 ears and 1 mouth. You got to use them in that ratio. They listen twice as much as you speak. Oh, I say that all the time, but people talk to get their point across. They don't. People listen to then wait for that person to speak, to talk, to get their point across. They don't sit there, listen, understand. All right, comprehend what. Okay, now I'm going to base what I'm going to say next on what I'm going to ask the agent. Just
I'll give you a good example of that now. Yeah. Right. So a good question to ask that one when you're talking to an agent is your seller ready to sell? It's a simple question, right? And it puts the onus back on the agent to either give you a quick off-the-cuff answer or think about it and then spin you this BS web. And you can see straight away how this negotiation is going to go. So what I want to know with that question is, are they ready to sign an unconditional contract today? And when you ask that question, it's really important, because you'll soon learn, no, they're not. And no, they're not because they're absolutely committed to take it to the open market, or they've already got another buyer that's just left the open home and rang the agent and told them they want to make an offer this afternoon, and it's going to go to a multi-offer boardroom, auction in about 2 hours' time. If you don't ask these questions, you don't understand how the process is going to roll out. You don't understand how you can close this deal. So you've got to ask those questions, and you've got to understand what your opportunities are and how you can control it from there. Now, if you've got buyer competition, and you know that they're not going to do it until a boardroom auction in 2 hours' time, for example, what the hell would be the point of opening your mouth and giving them a strong offer? They're just going to use that to leverage against you. So you need to understand, okay, well, if the client's ready to sell today, if it's just me talking to them, let's then talk about that dialogue. If it's me competing against another buyer, well, where's that buyer see interest? Has that buyer made an offer that you've rejected already? What are those buyers' terms? Are we competing at the same, blank canvas level, or have they got some sort of magical terms or major problems with their offer? Because we'll win properties for less money with better terms. Not always, but it happens all the time. It happens every week with us. Yep. And we'll lose things from offering the most money because someone else had a better solution to us. Even when we'd ask those questions, sometimes the agents are still playing games. You can't win them all. There's different ways this plays out, but it's all about what's the highest percentage chance, and it's asking those questions and listening.
A good one
intently.
I like is what else other than price is important to the owner? And they might say, well, they're going to move out, blah, 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 or they need time. And then sometimes you can get a little bit of feedback around, all right, especially in my sort of work in the properties I'm looking at, is that like sometimes I might need 6 months for a DA or to get a CDC across. So if they're coming back to me and they're saying, oh, well, they need time, I say, perfect. What about a 4-month settlement? What about a 6-month settlement? Yeah. Oh, yeah, that lines up with them perfectly. I bought a property once it was during the COVID phase, and I organised for early access at the site, and I ran into the owner there, and I spoke to him. I said, hey mate, how are you going, blah, 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 what's happening? And he actually told me that he was heading up to Queensland because the borders had opened, he could get up, and he wanted to quickly sell, get out and leave before the borders had closed again. And so also helped in the negotiations of he left a whole bunch of stuff at the house.
Yeah, I've done this multiple times as well. Yeah, I'll clear out all your crap. No worries, leave it with me.
I will. And then the conveyancers went back and forth. I was like, there has to be a price reduction if I'm going to clean out all this guy's stuff. And they said, they come back and they first said no. And then I knew that guy was already in Queensland. So I said, well, okay.
He can come back and do it.
I'm happy for them to go and clean it. Silence, come back. Look, we're willing to accept that. We're willing to accept that. So, like, as you said, the questions that you ask are fundamental. What about now, often pre-market? What about you've, for whatever reason, maybe the owner of the property has said, we don't want to go offer pre, we want to take it to market. We want much as eyes on this. You've got your couple of suburbs, realestateindomain.com. You've got the notifications set up, and boom, I think that comes in daily or every second day. You then get a notification, one Smith Street's just popped up, ticks all the boxes. I hear different stories from different people around when's the right time during that campaign to make an offer or to contact the agent. When do you think, after seeing that thing launch an hour ago to it staying on market, giving it a week or something like that, when do you think is the best time to be approaching and speaking to an agent when that property pops up on one of the portals?
Based on what I've just said previously, when do you think?
Straight away. Okay.
I wouldn't give anyone a sniffing chance in hell of competing against me if we could. Now, the balance of doing that is to come in red hot where an agent thinks, this guy's just going to pay an absolute premium with a cherry on top.
Yep.
Or actually balancing the right way. So the only thing that I believe that works in that situation, if you're not in a multi-offer situation and it's you going at it hard, when you know you're going to have other people interested in the days to come, is you have to leverage something. You have to give them a reason to say, I'm here today in front of you. I'm not here in 12 hours time. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you've got to ride or die on that comment, because if the agent thinks you're just bluffing them, they'll call you on that and they'll say, well, no problems. Like, this is obviously going to go to a multi-offer situation, so it's unfortunate you're going to miss out, but good luck, go and buy the other property.
So what do you say there? What do you say there? I come in hot and I've said, this is something I've been interested. I've been looking for a little while. I know the market. Yeah. I'm prepared to make an offer. I've asked a couple of those questions that you've said. Am I putting in an offer with an expiry date, and then riding onto that, or
I don't like to
like how you?
Yeah, I don't like to put time pressure on them specifically. Like a lot of people would negotiate and say, if it's not done by close of business today, I'm out. I'm like, well, what does it matter? Close of business today.
Yeah.
Like, it'll take my client a day to prepare themselves mentally to accept this deal. Get stuffed.
Mm-hmm.
Like, go and buy something else. Like, you haven't even told me you've got another property and you've just given me this ridiculous deadline that I've got to act for you. Who are you? Like, so as an agent, that would just put my back up and say, well, we'll get there when we get there. Like, if my client's willing to accept that deal, great. I'd love to try and help you, but not when you're trying to sledgehammer me that I've got to do it on your terms. Mm-hmm. So it is a similar vibe in terms of doing it on my terms, but you have to use that leverage and you've just got to own it. So you've got to say, okay, well, I've got that, 24-hour deadline or 48-hour deadline. It's not me. Don't shoot me. It's the other agent that's putting me under that pressure. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, I've just got to act, so I can't do anything. So they will relay that to their seller, and their seller will make a decision. Now, this is when people perceive themselves, well, I'm the first, cab off the rank. I'm going to make an offer that suits me. And they won't say that to themselves, but I swear to God, this was what happens with the vast majority of buyers that I've dealt with, and I've done this over 10,000 times. Yeah. People will go, well, I know the comps that are $1 million, but geez, I'd love to get it for 950, 960. Like, we really don't want, that big a mortgage if we can help it. Yep. And they'll come in at 950, and guess what the agent says? See you, mate. Go buy the other one, right? Because I've got 5 other people that are giving me feedback higher than that already. So they cannot help themselves but go low in that first win, just to try their luck, right? Mm-hmm. And have a go at it. The smart professional buyer in that instance goes, this is worth $1 million all day of the week. There was 5 other people there that are going to pay close to that or around that number. You've been looking for 7 months. You can stop the fight. It's rising at 1% a month in Brisbane or whatever at the moment, wherever you might be buying. Mm-hmm. This property next week costs you another $10,000. What do you want to do? Like, you got to make a smart offer in this situation and then use that leverage and that time pressure to get you the result. So you come in with a phenomenal offer at that point.
Strong offer. Best offer first.
I think you go, well, my trick is 95 to 97% of the way towards the target price. That's my rule of thumb, and it doesn't work all the time, okay? Mm-hmm. But this is something that I've lived and died by over 30 years. When I buy property and I've negotiated for thousands of clients, if you go in with an offer that's 95% of the way towards the price, and again, you pick your battles. Sometimes I go in at 100%. Sometimes I go in at 97%. But this is just a rough rule of thumb that I live by. Mm-hmm. If you go in at 95% or above, you're either going to buy it with your first offer, or you're going to engage the seller and get a counter offer, and you can decide to close it in 1 or 2 steps quickly from there. So you can act with speed and you engage them in that dogfight. If you don't engage them in that dogfight, you learn nothing. If you offer 90% of the way there and you get turned away, you get a no. And then what do you have to do? Start bidding against yourself. So then the agent goes, well, every time I say no, they put more money on the table. So I'm more inclined to say no to you because I think you're going to keep coming back because you're emotionally invested in this now, right? So you don't get emotionally invested in it. You go hard at the number. Yep. And then I buy a lot of properties in that 95 to 97% range. Like, we buy a lot of properties 3 to 5% below what we perceive the market value to be, and we do it quickly, really, really quickly with that strategy.
When's the time to throw a low ball offer at the agent? Is there anyone? I hear a lot of stories that people go, let's use an example. They'll go, 850 in a hopes the agent goes, like, we're talking $1 million. In order to bring that down, price setting it, throwing a real low ball offer. Does that still work? Is that a strategy you use for a particular type of property?
I tell you why I don't have a huge amount of feedback on low ball offers, and I hate them. And the reason is, if you're low balling a property, it's probably because it's been on the market for a long time, or your perception is there's no other buyer interest. Why the hell are you buying a property that's got problems or no one else wants to buy? So I would say I'd go through it with the client and say, well, unless there's mitigating circumstances here where we can perceive this to be an out of line result, then yeah, sure, maybe we go low on that one and just test the water and be prepared to move to the real number reasonably quickly thereafter. But that doesn't happen very, very often. When you're buying, if your principal place of residence, or you're buying a good quality investment property, you're buying in the right locations that are going to give you good, strong capital growth, and it's driven by owner-occupiers in those marketplaces that are going to pay those emotional premiums long term. You bet your ass there's going to be competition on it, and you want that. You want to be buying properties that are in high demand, right? You don't want to be buying dud properties. It might work if you're buying a property that you're going to do a substantial renovation on or a development on, where people can't see the value in it. You can. You're going to.
It's only got land value or something.
Exactly. You know what you can do with the zoning. You've got the capacity with the cash to do that. There's not many buyers in the market that have got that capacity at any given time. Absolutely lowball it and see what happens. But generally, and we're talking about the general investor here or the general person buying their own home doing it themselves, I'd say lowballing, just put a red line through it and focus on the fundamentals of what it's worth and understand what your perceived threat is in terms of buyer competition, because that's going to dictate where you start and finish.
I really like that because I think I only see very small or limited opportunities for that stock that's been on the market for a long time, and there's a reason why enough people have looked at it, and it's really only if you're doing major renovations. I'm thinking about this out loud, but there would be no reason for a well-priced property that you can get at a decent rate. There would be no point or no reason why that is on the market then for so long. Potentially the vendors, though, what about their expectations? Like, let's say it's a $400,000 house. I know it's good value at $400,000. The vendors have expectations too high, and maybe it's been left on the market for a long time, or does the agent then pull that off or readjust?
I don't think you'd classify that as a low ball, though, isn't it? Because they might want $495 as an asking price when it's worth $400. It might be perceived as a low ball when you come in at $400, but if that's what it's worth, you're coming in at market value, aren't you? Or close to it. If you had a situation where it was sitting on the market at a reasonable price, I don't know. I still fall back on the whole idea that you're either buying a dud asset or you're buying. There's a reason why people have walked away from it. I see a lot of this with investors that will make value decisions based on. They'll come to us and they'll say, "Okay, I've already found this property in Jones Street in Townsville. Really interested in it. What can you do that's better?" You know what I mean? I've already found this. Why would I pay you a professional fee in terms of what can you do that beats this? And I say, well, let's just have a quick look at it. Well, you're buying a property in a flood zone. Yep. So, that's the first thing. I would never have even presented this property to you because you've just put a noose around your neck for the next 20 years in terms of capital growth and insurance costs and, and potentially risks in selling that property in the future. So just simple things like that people don't understand. There's a reason why things are cheap. Yep. You want to buy, I'm really focused on buying quality asset as best as possible. And that doesn't necessarily mean you're paying high prices, premium prices, but you want to buy properties that are in demand. I don't come across a lot of lowballing. It's not really a tactic that we see. It's a bloody tactic that I see online from, keyboard warriors all day in property forums about I lowball this, I
come in and lowball. I see it all the time. That's why I ask you, I think it's a lot of armchair investors and bullshit. Sells a pretty good story though. Okay, and just on that, coming in at that 95 or that 97, let's say it's $1 million is my 95%. They come back at $1,050,000. Is there anything you're using there to come back up, or is it like the percentage that they come back with? Like if they're going $1,050,000, do you stay? Or if they're going at 1.1, does that tell you if you need to come back, and if so, by how much? Do you sort of get what I'm saying?
I'm still laser focused on comparable sales evidence and my read of what's happening in the market to determine what my version of market value is. So no matter what they come back at, it'll be dictated by what those terms are for me in my mind, and I'll know that walk away target price before I start. So there's no emotional investment from me. I'll know $1 million is where I stop because it's not worth more than $1 million. Now, if they came back and said, well, we're at $1,050,000, you go to $1 million over the course of another another step up or whatever, and then they come back and say, well, we'll take $1,015,000. That's when you have to be smart about it. You got to make a judgment call. Well, I've been looking for 7 months or 5 months. This is my ideal property in the right location. Fine, I'm going to have to pay 10 grand too much or 15 grand too much for it. And maybe in those situations we do that to wrap up a property for a client if that's the right outcome for them. But otherwise we stay firm and we say, no, the comparable sales evidence doesn't back that up. And remember, data, again, property is not an exact science. If you get into I rarely use, this is probably something that you may or may not realize. You maybe, but in terms of you're very knowledgeable in the property space, but the general buyer, probably doesn't. When I negotiate, I basically never use comparable sales when I'm negotiating, when I talk to the client. I'm talking to the agent.
Okay.
So I'll never say to them, well, 1 Smith Street is what we're talking about here, but 10 Smith Street just sold for, 980, and 11 Smith Street just sold 3 weeks ago for $1,020,000, so therefore this is only worth X. Because every time you do that with an agent, a good agent who knows their product knowledge better than you is going to say, yeah, but we sold Jones Street off the market on Thursday for $1,040,000. You didn't even see that one. This is worth $1,040,000 all day of the week. You'll never win, is what I'm trying to say, against a good agent based on comparable sales. So as a professional negotiator, I don't even use. I do the comparable sales. We understand where the numbers sit. Up here. Yeah, but I never even go down that path. We just talk about the real numbers. Yeah, it's really interesting when you negotiate one-on-one with another professional. The seller's only going to sell it for the lowest possible number they're going to sell it for. The buyer's only going to pay the highest possible number they're going to buy it for. The rest is just a bit of argy-bargy, and it takes about 5 seconds for us to get there. So if you're an agent and I'm a professional negotiator, it's a really easy process, typically. When you put a buyer there against an agent, they get emotionally invested. They try and play off. But this one sold. My broker gave me a print off with a core logic, estimate. Well, unfortunately, we laugh about that, but that's unfortunately what we have to deal with all the time. Brokers giving out, desktop algorithms, and then unfortunately that sinks their buyer. Yeah. They think they're doing their client a service. It's actually a massive disservice because the buyers bring those to a negotiation, and the agents just laugh and say it's got no relevance to market value whatsoever. Next.
Yeah, okay, cool. Logic auto val, something to know.
Yeah.
The agents sometimes use that though because they're not always entirely accurate, and sometimes those auto vals will be a lot higher, or there's times where it could be like 50 grand more, and it's got like low or medium confidence in terms of where they put it. And I've seen some agents have them because the automated value that's in there is like way higher than what the property's worth, and try to sort of set that bar, set that expectation for
and the other way, they'll use them as well for their Office of Fair Trading guidelines that they need to meet in the office in the folder to use low comparable sales that come out of that and use that as the ability to then quote lower. Yeah. And then, of course, when you get into a negotiation 4 weeks later, there's a comparable sale that's just happened that's substantially higher than the comparables that they were using to guide. And all of a sudden the negotiation is around the top of the mountain.
Yeah, okay.
So there's all these different price positioning tricks like that. But falls back on the whole 4 to 8 weeks. You study a market for 4 to 8 weeks, you can't be fleeced because you're watching things sell in real time. You understand market dynamics and market depth, and you're seeing all of the opportunities, and you understand where the pockets of value are. You cannot get fleeced in that. Yeah, unless you just get emotionally invested and get carried away, but that's on you. You need to stay strong and back the numbers if you're handling a negotiation yourself.
All right, and probably the only other form that I want to ask you about, and we've had your friend on to talk about it, but auctions.
Yeah.
Obviously, they're not ideal for securing a property and eliminating competition. Do you have any comments or anything you want to add around them?
I think from a method of sale for a selling agent and a seller is potentially really good. I was an auction agent, in my Bell days, so I understand that method of sale really clearly and the alternative options as well. And I know Damo's been on the show, and Damo's a mate who is, I think, one of the best in the country, and we used him for our auctions because he's so good at his craft. But that suited our narrative to do that. And it suits the agent's narrative because they can control the days on market. They can turn over more property. They can build their profile in a marketplace by having big public shows of, positive outcomes and results. And they can prove that they're the difference between, an average agent and an exceptionally strong result. In terms of if we flip that and we talk about your question of, what's my perception of that as a buyer or a professional negotiator?
How we win in the auctions, Scott?
Yeah, well, I'll give you this raw stats. And I think these are the things that people don't really talk about in the industry that I think is really important from an accountability and transparency perspective. We we buy about 10 properties a week across the country at any price point. So we're, pretty active in terms of the coal face of what's going on.
How many, sorry?
We buy about 10 properties a week. Yep. Now, our strike rate in a negotiation is 70%. Now, we never lose within the parameters that the client sets us. So if you set me $1 million, we're not losing at $990. We're buying that property. But if it's sold for $1,010,000, it becomes one of the 30% that we missed, right? So we won't lose within the parameters that the client gives us, okay? So our strike rate still is only 7 in 10 because there's just constantly people overpaying that go beyond where we perceive market value to be. So that's the real version of buying property, and that's us getting to these things at an earlier stage, off market, prior to auction, private treaty, whatever it might be. When it gets to auction day, our strike rate's 30%. Okay, so it's the reverse of that. We're getting 3 out of 10 that we win. And the reason why is because you're dealing with people that are emotionally invested. Yep, buyers. You're dealing with buyers that have got access to bank and mum and dad, and people that just get carried away by the ultimate sort of pressure cooker environment that an auction creates. Okay. And it's the people that have missed 5 times that are getting to that point where they've got buyer fatigue and they want to stop the fight. And you don't want to be in that situation because you don't control the cards. So that's the reason why we don't like buying at auction. We will only buy at auction when a client engages us in the 3rd week of an auction campaign and we don't have a choice, or it's a deceased estate, trust sale, or whatever that dictates that it's got to go to auction. Yep. But otherwise, we know from the stats over 6.5 years that you've got a far higher chance of winning the property at a better price at a much earlier stage.
Are you putting in if it's going to auction, you're already, that campaign's going, you're talking to them as we said, as that went live, and you're already making your offer.
Yep.
Heaps early in the sales campaign, right?
Typically in the first 72 hours, we would have wrapped it up or moved on. And I'll tell you another thing just on that.
Go on.
The speed of that is that if we don't buy that property in the first 72 hours, the likelihood of us coming back to buy that at another stage is near 0%.
0%?
Near zero. It would be incredibly low, the number. Because you establish, if you ask the right questions and you do the right research on market value, whether that seller is even remotely interested at market value. And if they're not, it's highly unlikely they ever come back to that point. Some other goose overpays for it at the other end, or their expectations just stay in la-la land and they don't sell. They become one of the 30% or whatever that doesn't sell under auction terms. So we know that we really can burn the boats in the first 72 hours, right? Like we can go hard at that and then just walk away from it. And we will watch it and we'll track that sale, but it's very, very, very rare that we'd ever go back to it.
So it almost always sells for higher.
Or doesn't sell.
Than what you've offered.
Yep. So that's the key to it, right? You've got to get to these properties at an earlier stage and control that process. Otherwise, you're going to pay more for it or miss out.
Yeah, very good points. Do you have, this episode has been incredible. I almost don't want to chop up the little reels that we put on Instagram because I don't want to tell people a lot of these secrets, use them for myself, but incredible value. Do you have a last bit of, I call it the golden nugget, but do you have a last little sort of piece of advice or sort of a little bit of information that maybe you haven't said anywhere else or that you'd give our audience to take away and use? Do you have sort of like that last bit of advice?
Good question. Well, I try to be as transparent. Well, not try. I am just completely transparent with all this stuff because I believe that educating buyers is the only way that we're going to transform the industry, really. Like, education is power, so I want people to understand the games that are at play, how to alleviate those and navigate those in the buying process. I'll give you one trick that we use that has an incredibly high strike rate for us in terms of its success that I don't believe many people use in the industry, but it serves us very well. In a multi-offer situation, which happens to us every day, and you can't control that, if you're in a situation where you've come to a property late or the agent just wants to run it that way, and Perth, Brisbane, Ipswich, Townsville, they're all good examples right now of multi-offer situations that are on the daily. Yep. What we do is I'll say to the agent, David, I've sat in your chair. I understand what you've got to do. Your job's to exhaust all parties and get the best possible result for your client. I'd do the same thing if I were you. I respect that position. We really want to buy this property, and I'm sure you've got other people that want to do the same thing, and I understand you'll run this process. I want to get a clear idea of what your process is and how you're going to do this, and they'll explain it. Okay, great. Well, it's going to be it's Saturday now, 12 o'clock, best and finals by 6 o'clock tonight, or best of finals by close of business Monday, or whatever that might be. Once we've established the ground rules, and I want to ask things like, are you going to disclose the offers? Is it going to go back and forth like ping pong? Or are you just going to make it absolute best and finals? Every agent does it different. So you've got to ask these questions to understand when you're going to put your offer in and how hard you go at it in terms of what order you might need to do it in. Once we've got all that set, I'll say, okay, great, David, I understand that. It's clear for me, the picture of what we've got to do here to win this. Obviously, we know to win this, we're going to have to be the highest bidder, and we're not scared to be if it falls within our parameters. I'm going to ask you a favour. I'm going to start this process for you this afternoon, and I'm going to make an absolute knockout punch with our first offer to alleviate, huge amounts of work that you've potentially got to do going back and forth with other people. I'm happy for you to disclose that offer if that helps you, move the needle and get the owner a better price. What I would say though is once you've exhausted all the bidding, I'd like the last right of refusal, and you disclose what that number is. And if I can beat it, I'll beat it. And if I can't beat it, you're still going to sell it for the highest possible price. Do you accept? And you'd be highly surprised how many agents say, I've never heard that before. That's quite clever.
Fuck, I don't want to even put that in. I want to use that one for myself.
Yeah, and yes, we agree to it. So they run the process, and they call me back at 5 to 5 on Monday afternoon and say, I've got a million and 11. What do you want to do? And I said, what do I need to do to buy it? 1,013,000. Done. Wow. No one had a fighting chance in hell of beating us, and we didn't have to stress about it for 2 days. We just say if it's in the lap of the gods, if it's going to fall in our lap, it does. If it doesn't, then it's gone beyond where we see market value anyway. So good luck to the buyer. So and we don't start that process with our best offer, right? You're not going to go in at 1,011,000 to start with if it's worth $1 million. We might have gone in at say 970 or 971 or some random thing like that.
Yep.
Because we know again it's going to start the process with the vendor, get them thinking about selling and what they're really going to take, and it's also going to cut out a heap of competition probably straight away that aren't prepared to go to that big number early. This is a really important thing that happens in negotiation. I think a lot of people don't realize as well that if you start this is how do I pre-frame this? Part of the reason why I think we're so successful at an earlier stage of the process when we make these offers and close these deals, when people think it's otherwise impossible to do it, is because buyers aren't confident enough to offer a huge number early. They need to see other buyers to have confidence that there's interest in the property and they're not overspending. So the inexperienced buyer won't go to that large number straight away unless they've got the pain point and they've missed before and they know what things are worth. Yeah. So on the vast majority of times, you're competing against people that need that education and need time. Yep. They often need to come back 2 or 3 times. They get their mum and dad to come along. Meanwhile, you bought it in the first 24 hours. You go straight for the throat straight away, and most people won't compete against you because they're blown away by that.
And last little question I have for you as we wrap this up. This is I feel like you could talk all day, and I'd listen to you all day about this. The number that you're putting in, do you see any value around it being odd, even 97160 or 970,000? Do you see any correlation or any stats with that? Some people say it's got to be an odd number or like 971,000, anything like that?
If we ask those questions when we get the last right of refusal, it's irrelevant. So because it doesn't matter. But if you're doing a sealed bid,
that first offer that you put in, that 970 that you said,
if he's not going to disclose it, it probably doesn't make much difference whether it's 970 or 971. Doesn't make any difference at all. It's really just a starting point that they're going to leverage back against other buyers because they're going to disclose that, and if someone beats it, they beat it. If you buy it with that number, you buy it, right?
Yep.
If you're in a sealed bids, which happens quite often as well, and you don't get that opportunity. So it's going to be, okay, well, there's 3 people competing for it. You just got to put your best number on a contract and I'll open it at 12:01 kind of scenario on Tuesday afternoon in the office.
Yeah.
Well, then, yes, we'll put an odd number into it. So we might go 971,000 or 971 and 1 or whatever it might be, just on the odd chance that you beat someone by $1,000 or $10 or whatever it is.
Yep.
But I'll tell you what happens if the flip side of this from an agent's perspective, right? I'll have buyers come in and do their sealed bids.
Yeah.
And you'll offer 970, I'll offer 985, and then the next buyer will offer 1,061,000. Yep. And they're far apart. And this is what used to happen to me in expressions of interest all the time, which is why I used to do expressions of interest a lot in terms of our sales as an agent.
Yeah.
Now, why this is important is because when I call that buyer, the lead buyer, I'm going to say to them, David, mate, congratulations. Geez, you've priced this absolutely within a whisker. Like you've beaten this guy by $4,500 or whatever like that came in right behind you. Congratulations. Congratulations. You've so switched on with where market value is. And I wrap you up in cotton wool and make you feel like $1 million.
Yeah.
You've just overpaid by $78,000 or whatever it might be. And this is why Australian buyers believe that it's a badge of honour to go it alone. And Arnie Beryl out-negotiated an agent by $50,000, and you'll hear about that at the barbecue on Saturday afternoon. And my mate, Peter, he screwed the agent down $20,000 and got a great deal. They didn't. Arnie Beryl bought a property that I priced at $850 that was worth $780, and she bought it for $800 and overpaid by $20,000 because I price positioned it at a level that I knew that if I gave her a massive discount, that'd be what got the deal across the line. You need to understand the games that are at play. Unless you understand market value, you're just going to consistently get ripped off. So all these people that think it's a badge of honor to go it alone when they're spending the biggest amount of money in their life need to really think about this. Am I prepared to put in the hard yards? Am I prepared to learn, or am I prepared to outsource it to a professional? Because it's not a mug's game. There's a lot going on, which we've just unpacked a tiny amount of it. But yeah, there's you got to go into it with your eyes wide open.
Yeah, Jesus. Look, I'll say it now. It won't be the last time we hear from Scott. I think there is enormous value in this entire potty, and it is giving a lot of people tools to get through that offer stage, that for sale stage, when, how, what to ask, and that kind of stuff. My last question for you, Scott, is what's a quote you live your life by?
It's from the great Ricky Bobby. If you ain't first, you're last.
Nice. Done. All right, thanks for coming on, mate. I appreciate it.